Okay, let's take a look at the surface area of rectangular prisms. First off, let's remind ourselves characteristics of rectangular prisms, right? So this folds up into a rectangular prism. We flatten it out to find the surface area. There are two bases, one on the top, one on the bottom. There are 4 lateral sides. There's going to be 2 bases always with prisms, and the lateral sides are based on the shape. Since a rectangle has 4 sides, the lateral sides are 4. When you when you label the net to find the surface area, there should be 3 sets of rectangular pairs. And we'll talk about that as we are completing the problem, and it'll make a little bit more sense. So when I look at my shape, we have 3 values, right? And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to note that this rectangle should be congruent to this rectangle. Okay. This rectangle should be congruent to this rectangle. And last but not least, this base that's on the top should be congruent to this base that's on the bottom, which means they should have the same dimensions. They should have the same length and width. So let's label those sides first. I'm going to start with this side length going across of 20. I'm going to put that right here. Remembering, since these are congruent, it should go 20, not 20. This should also be 20. Okay? What I also want to remember is if this is 20, since that's the top of the rectangle, the bottom of the rectangle is also 20. If the bottom of this rectangle is 20, the top of this rectangle is also 20, or the bottom of the other one. Okay? Let's look at our next length, 8. So it goes 20, then 8 is right next to it. So it should go 20, 8, and then 20, and then 8. They alternate. Okay? When we look at our shape, these 2 sides right here, which are these 2 sides, maybe I can tilt it this way so it's a little easier to see. These 2 sides match up. When they fold, they match together. So I take those 2 sides, I fold them up, they match together, which means they should be the same length. So this side of 8 folds and connects to this side of 8. This folds here, connects to this side of 8, which makes sense. Those opposite sides should be congruent. If this bottom rectangle is congruent to the top rectangle, that means this side length there should be 8 as well. And then last thing we're looking at here is this height of the prism. 16 is going to be the height of these lateral faces. So 16, 16, 16, 16. Okay? Now that I have labeled it, I am just going to calculate the area. I'm going to multiply 20 times 16 to get 320. If this green rectangle is 320, that means this green rectangle is 320. I'm going to multiply here. 8 times 16 is 128. If this rectangle in the pink is 128, this other pink one is also 128. And then multiplying one of the yellows, 20 times 8 is 160. If this bottom rectangle is 160, this top rectangle is 160. So when we said that we should have 3 sets, that means we should have 3 sets of 2, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rectangles total. So I should have 2 of the same, 320 and 320. I should have another set of 2, 128 and 128. And then last, 160 and 160. The only time that we shouldn't have 3 sets is if we had a square somewhere in it where you had 2 sides that were the same length. So I'm just going to add up all of these measures. When I plug that into my calculator, I get 1,216. Our units are centimeters. We're talking about area. Area is squared. So 1,216 centimeters squared. Let's try another one. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this rectangle on the left. It's not going to be congruent to the one right next to it. It's going to be congruent to the next one over. This rectangle right here, remembering that it alternates. Green, pink, green. This next one on the right should be pink. And then last, our bases. The bottom base should be congruent to the top base. Now, let's label. Just like I started with this length going across here of 20, I'm going to do the same thing over here. So this length going across is 10. So if this green bottom is 10, this green bottom is 10. It alternates 10, not 10, 10, not 10. If this length here is 10, that means that's the top of this rectangle, so the bottom of this rectangle is also 10. If the bottom of this rectangle is 10, that means the top of it is 10 as well. So I'm going to look again across. We've got 3. So it goes 10 and then 3, 10, 3, 10, 3. And like we talked about, these two sides right here fold up into each other. They equal each other. So these two sides should be equal. So this should be 3, which means that should be 3. Our bottom base is congruent to the top, so that means these sides should also be 3. And then our last measure is the height of the prism. That's going to be the height of these lateral sides. So 4, 4, 4, 4. Now let's calculate those areas. Plug it into my calculator. 4 times 10 is 40. If this green is 40, the other green is 40. Here, 3 times 4 is 12. If this pink is 12, this pink is 12. And then our base, 10 times 3 is 30. If the bottom base is 30, the top base is 30. Then we're going to add them up and we're going to make sure we've got our pairs. So I've got a 40 and another 40. I've got a 12 and a 12. And my bases, I've got a 30 and a 30. I'm going to add those all together, and I get a total of 164. Our units are inches. We're talking about area, so squared. All right, let's do one more together. It looks a little bit different, so we want to make sure that we are doing it right. So, keeping with the same method, my first rectangle I'm highlighting in green. This little skinny one in between, I'm going to highlight in pink. And then my bases on the top and bottom, I'm going to highlight in yellow. So this one kind of looks a little bit different. So if it's going to help you, if we look at this little bottom rectangle, if it helps you to shade that in as you're doing it, then go ahead and do that, okay? So we've got 14 and 3. So I'm going to start with 14. And just like I've always done, I'm going to start with this green rectangle here, put a 14, okay? Goes 14, not 14, 14. The other length, 3, is going to go next to it. So 14, 3, 14, 3. Let's fill in some things before we do the last digit. If this top of the rectangle is 14, the bottom of the rectangle is 14. If the bottom of the rectangle is 14, the top of the rectangle is 14. Okay? And then these two sides are the ones that connect. The 3 connects over here. So the height of our base is 3. If that's on the bottom, it's going to be the same on the top. And then our last measure is the height of the prism here. I'm going to mark that as the height of my lateral faces. 12, 12, 12, 12. And now we can calculate. And you can always double check. I've got a 14 and 12, 14 and 12. I've got a 14 and a 3, a 14 and a 3, a 3 and a 12, 3 and a 12. You shouldn't have more than 2 of each kind. So I'm going to multiply. 14 times 12 is 168. So both of the green rectangles are 168. My pink 12 times 3 is 36. So both of those pink rectangles are 36. And then our bottom 14 times 3 is 42. So both of those are 42. And let's add up those pairs. So starting with the greens, we've got 2 168s. Then our pinks, we've got 2 36s. And then our bases, we've got 2 42. So we have 3 sets, a set of 168, a set of 36, a set of 42. I add those all up, I get a total surface area of 492 inches squared. And that's it.